What's going on, everybody? So glad that you're back. It's very bright today. Also, there's a plane. But anyway, I'm hiding behind a tree so that the sun doesn't totally blow out my face here. Also, you may or may not remember from a video that I made a few months ago when I was talking about my arthritis issues that I have going on, that I basically cut out caffeine. Well, I had like 5 cups today, so buckle up, YouTube. Might be a bit of a wild ride. It's an incredibly noisy day today. We got planes, we got boats, we got tree frogs, all sorts of birds going on. But you know what? We're gonna power through. Anywho, last year I put together a video. Last year, almost to this day exactly. I think it was Valentine's Day of last year, so tomorrow from today. Anyway, last year I put together a video on 6 pieces of gear that I'm no longer going to be taking with me on trips. I just put together one for this year too, so if you haven't seen it already, go ahead and check that out. I'll put a link somewhere around here. So what I wanted to do today was follow up on that video, talk about which pieces of gear made it back into my pack and which pieces of gear I'm still no longer using. Because I will be the first to admit that I may have been a little bit overzealous last year. There were lots of different responses to that last video, and it was definitely polarizing at best. And it was also definitely fun because that was like one of my first videos that I ever put out, so I was definitely not prepared for the response. So looking back, I think that there were some points where I definitely nailed it, and there were others where I definitely missed the mark. But hey, the fun thing about the internet is that whatever you say lives on forever. Anyway, with that, let's dive in. Up first is my ass pad, and I'm not gonna hold it up while I'm talking on camera just because I'm actually sitting on it right now. Turns out that it is awesome for when I'm out in the woods filming these videos and I don't want to get my butt wet. But I did say last year that I wasn't planning on taking it with me on any more trips, just because for the most part, I am pretty happy just sitting on the ground. And I would say by and large, that pretty much holds up. I didn't use it all last summer, and I only recently started adding it into my pack during the colder months when the ground is soaking wet or it's near freezing, and I just don't want to have a cold, wet butt. And again, I will point out that I definitely use it all the time when I'm out filming videos like this, just because I'm in jeans. I don't really want to get them wet, but I don't think that counts. If you'll recall, it really wasn't so much the weight that bothered me because it weighs basically nothing. I think it's under 2 ounces or something like that, but it was more the bulk. I can just never find a good place to put it. It just barely fits in the front pocket of my pack, but it's kind of annoying to kind of smush it in there, and I hate having things strapped to the outside of my pack. It's one of my biggest pet peeves when it comes to backpacking, is having all sorts of stuff just sort of dangling off the sides or strapped to the outside. It just drives me nuts. I like to be sleek, you know? So again, even though I didn't use it all last summer, I did end up incorporating it back into my kit going into the fall and winter, and this is probably a strategy that I am going to continue to use. It stays out of the pack during the warmer months, and then when things cool off or when the rain comes back, I'll bring it back with me. That said, I have been thinking about picking up a Gossamer Gear Thin Light to supplement my sleep system, and if I do that, that means that my regular butt pad may not come with me at all anymore, and I can just use the folded Thin Light to sit on. So yeah, the ass pad has a place in the pack during certain conditions, but definitely not a summer necessity by any means. Up next is my CNOC Vecto. If you'll recall, I ditched this because I planned on just putting my filter directly on my water bottle. Also, I did find that the screw cap on this would leak every now and again, and I didn't really trust it as a method of water storage, especially if I was going to be putting it in my pack or something like that. But if we're being totally honest, this ended up going back in my pack pretty much immediately. First off, it turns out that I really don't enjoy having my water filter screwed directly onto my bottle. It just makes it really tall and awkward and kind of annoying to use. You're like trying to drink like this. I'm not a huge fan. You also need to be continually like, I don't know what you would call it, like burping the water bottle, where you unscrew the water filter a little bit so that you can let some air back into the bottle so that you can squeeze more water out. Anyway, it just gets kind of annoying and old. Also, and perhaps most importantly, it turns out that I am just kind of a dummy, and I just wasn't tightening the screw cap on the Vecto tight enough, and that's why it was leaking. Now I make sure to just kind of wrench down on it really good, and it holds water just fine and it doesn't leak. I'm not sure what I was thinking or why I thought that I could just screw it on loosely and it would hold the water in. And another point for the Vecto is it just makes filtering water, especially for a group, like if I'm out with friends or if it's me and Lynn and I'm the only one carrying a filter, it just makes the whole process of filtering so much easier. It's so much more convenient than squirting it out of the bottle. I will point out too that it's about the same weight as 2 smart water bottles, so there's really no weight savings by getting rid of it if I do need to potentially carry 4 liters while on a trip. It's very rare that I'm carrying more than 2 liters, but I do like to have 4 liters of capacity. I found that it's really nice to have the extra storage, so that way I can grab a little bit of extra water before I make camp for the night. That way I have lots of extra water for cooking and stuff, and I don't feel like I have to ration it. So yeah, it's back in my pack just because it's so damn convenient. Up next, is my Sea to Summit X mug. I thought that was gonna be way cooler when I did it. It wasn't. I said that I was no longer going to be carrying this with me just because I'm perfectly happy drinking out of my cup, and that's totally true. This hasn't gone with me since. At 2.6 ounces, the weight of the X mug may not seem like a lot, but it's kind of one of those things where if you take a whole bunch of stuff that you don't need and you start adding it up, it can become pretty significant weight very quickly. So I was more than happy just to get it out of my pack. I do see a potential situation, maybe if it's very cold out, where I do see myself wanting to take it again. Maybe I want to be able to have coffee and cook dinner at the same time. Or if I'm on a trip where I don't especially care about being light and I'm just kind of out there to have fun, sure, maybe it'll come back. But for now, I haven't carried it at all. I know that for some people, mealtime in the woods and really enjoying that experience while they're out backpacking is super important to them. But for me personally, I just don't care that much. I will admit that in terms of time and fuel, it's probably slightly more efficient to do one boil than to, you know, make my coffee, drink it, then boil more water to make a meal or something like that. But whatever, it hasn't bothered me that much. I will say though that if you are going to take a cup, this thing is freaking awesome. It doesn't get crazy hot like metal does. Also, it holds in the heat pretty well. I have seen some double-walled titanium mugs that look really cool for winter and stuff, but they are much heavier than this, and I don't really know where I would pack it. This thing packs down so small, it's great. So yeah, I reserve the right to put this back in my pack at any time, but for now, I'm cool just leaving it at home. Up next is stuff sacks. Well, not any stuff sack, but like stuff sacks for everything. I used to be kind of stuff sack crazy, and everything would get its own little stuff sack, but I try not to do that anymore. I still use stuff sacks where it makes sense, but definitely far less of them than I used to. There's definitely a sweet spot when it comes to organization. Too many stuff sacks, like an individual stuff sack for everything that you have, and you may as well just not put anything in stuff sacks because it's just floating around loose in your pack. And obviously not enough stuff sacks and you are losing all of the things that don't have a home. A really extreme example here would be like, I'm not gonna take ibuprofen and just like sprinkle it loosely in my pack because I'll obviously lose it. Like, it needs a home of some kind. And the same can be said for a lot of the small things that are in my pack. Overall though, I think that it's best to pack things somewhat loosely and take just enough stuff sacks to have some degree of organization so that you know where things are. For me personally, I have one large pack liner, a ditty bag for like 90% of my small things, a stuff sack for my bathroom stuff so that I can just like grab it and go, a food bag, a tiny little stuff sack for my stove so that I don't beat up my pot too much when it's banging around in there while I'm hiking around, and a rock sack for a bear hang. I guess that's 6. I do occasionally take one more dry bag for my sleeping bag, but it's not something that I do all the time. It's typically during the colder or rainier months around here, and that's just because I don't want to be taking my dry sleeping bag and then trying to stuff it into a wet backpack. No matter how I do it, the sleeping bag kind of drags across the backpack, and then it just ends up getting all wet and gross, so I like to be able to pack it up in my tent in its own stuff sack, and then I can put it in my pack. We currently have about 3 bins at home that are, you know, this size, full of stuff sacks, plus another stuff sack that's full of stuff sacks, so lots of stuff sacks. I'd like to buy a house, but my wealth is currently tied up in stuff sacks. It's totally excessive. All right, up next is line locks. Okay, so I may have been pushing it just a little bit with this one. I still don't have line locks on my tarp, but I definitely haven't gone out of my way to cut them off of any of my tents at this point. Like, honestly, my tents are expensive. I can't bring myself to cut the line locks off of them. And let's be honest, line locks are super convenient, and in some cases, it makes setup just way easier, especially if you have cold hands. That said, I still do stand by what I said, that knots are stronger. I especially noticed this when I put my trekking pole into my tent. Sometimes if I try to kind of like push it in there, I will notice that the line locks around the corners will kind of zip up a little bit. I mean, part of that's user error. I shouldn't be jamming the pole in that hard, but you know, I also just find knots a ton of fun to mess with. It's just really satisfying to learn how to tie knots. Moving forward, I'll probably continue using all the line locks on my tents, and then if I can order tarps without line locks, I will, but if they come with line locks, it's not a big deal. It is really nice when tarps don't have line locks, just because it's way easier to move lines around then. So with a flat tarp, for instance, if you want to be able to set it up in a bunch of different configurations, rather than having a bunch of really long lines on every tie out, you can have a couple of long ones and some shorter ones, and then just kind of move them around as need be, depending on how you want to set things up. I think overall, you're not really saving any weight by cutting them off. They're really just a few grams, so don't feel like you need to do it to be super UL or whatever, but hey, if you like knots, feel free. And then finally, this one was the biggie, is my Gerber LST. There were some incredibly strong opinions about getting rid of a knife on trail. And the honest truth is, I very rarely use a knife while I'm out backpacking. And there's not really anything that I use it for that a good pair of scissors wouldn't work just as well for, or better, for that matter. That said, the smallest form factor that I could find for a pair of scissors that wasn't overly pokey was this cute little Victorinox Classic. Ooh, just got really sunny. We're just gonna roll with it. We're gonna deal with the sun. But yeah, this is what I ended up replacing my Gerber LST with. At the end of the day, I'm not in the business of telling people what they should or should not carry in their pack. If having a large knife makes you feel more comfortable or adds to your experience on trail, then by all means, take it with you. But at this point, the Gerber hasn't gone back into my pack at all. I haven't gotten rid of it though, because I actually really like it. It's a cool little knife. It just really isn't terribly functional for my current style of hiking. So all in all, backpacking gear is highly personal stuff. So don't let me or really anybody on the internet tell you what you should or shouldn't carry with you in your pack. If you like something, then keep on taking it with you. If you have any feedback on things that you think should have stayed out of my pack or anything that you think that I should add back in, please let me know down in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. If you haven't seen the original video, go ahead and check that out. There's lots of spicy comments, both on the long video and the short, so have fun. And of course, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.